I was repainting the front porch railing when my phone buzzed in my shirt pocket. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October, one of those crisp Charlotte days that reminds you why people moved to North Carolina in the first place. The leaves on the oak tree at the edge of my yard had just started turning, and I'd been meaning to get that railing done before the weather turned on me. I set the brush across the paint can and pulled out my phone, expecting a text from my brother, or maybe a reminder about the dentist appointment I kept rescheduling. It was a text from my daughter-in-law. "Hey Frank, hope you're doing well. Tyler and I have been talking, and we think this year we'd like to do Thanksgiving a little differently. My mom is going to be staying with us for the whole week, and with the kids' schedules and her health stuff, it's just going to be easier to keep it smaller and quieter. Immediate family only. We're so grateful for everything you do for Owen and Lily, and we hope you understand. Maybe we can do a dinner the weekend before? It would mean a lot to us. Megan." I read it twice, standing there on the porch with paint on my fingers. Immediate family only. I set the phone down on the porch step and looked out at the street. A neighbor walked by with her dog and waved. I waved back. Inside, something had gone very still. My late wife, Carol, used to say that the quietest moments before a storm were the ones you had to pay attention to. She'd been gone 5 years now, and I still caught myself thinking about what she'd say in situations like this. I knew exactly what she would have said. She would have looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "Frank, that woman has been angling for this since the day Megan married Tyler." She would have been right. Let me back up. When my son Tyler married Megan 9 years ago, I was genuinely happy for them. Megan was smart, warm, the kind of person who remembered your coffee order and actually listened when you talked. I liked her from the first time Tyler brought her home for Christmas, the year after Carol was diagnosed. She'd helped Carol in the kitchen without being asked and talked to her like she was a person, not a patient. That meant a lot to both of us. Megan's mother, Sandra, was a different matter entirely. Sandra lived in Mooresville, about 25 minutes from Tyler and Megan's house in Concord. She'd been divorced twice, drove a car that I suspected she couldn't fully afford, and had a way of inserting herself into every conversation that made you feel like you'd been slowly moved out of your own lane on the highway before you even noticed it happening. She was never outright rude. That was the thing. She was the kind of person who made you feel vaguely bad about yourself, and then turned to someone else and said something charming before you could figure out what had just happened. At Tyler and Megan's wedding, Sandra had given a toast that was supposed to be about the couple, but somehow became a 12-minute story about Megan's childhood and all the sacrifices Sandra had made as a single mother. She cried at exactly the right moment. Everyone applauded. Carol leaned over and whispered to me. She rehearsed that. I told her to be charitable. She gave me a look that meant she was right, and we both knew it. When the twins were born 7 years ago, Sandra was at the hospital before the delivery was even over. She'd set herself up in the waiting room like she was staging a scene, with a flower arrangement and a gift bag and a framed photo of Megan as a baby that she'd had printed at a Walgreens on the way. By the time I arrived, she'd already given interviews to every nurse on the floor about what a remarkable daughter she'd raised. I held my grandchildren for about 4 minutes before Sandra announced that Megan needed to rest. I drove home that night and called Carol's sister and talked for an hour. I'm not proud of that. I should have been home celebrating. But I'd felt something that night that I couldn't shake the first draft of what being an afterthought felt like. Still, I tried. I always tried. I called every Sunday. I showed up to every school play, every soccer game, every birthday party. I never came empty-handed, and I never came without calling first. When Carol passed, Tyler and Megan were there every day for 2 weeks, and Sandra sent a casserole and a sympathy card. I told myself that was fine. People showed grief differently. 2 years ago, Tyler called me on a Sunday evening with that particular tension in his voice that fathers recognize the sound of a grown child asking for something they're embarrassed to need. He told me that Owen had been struggling in school. His reading comprehension was behind, and his teacher suspected he had a processing issue that wasn't being addressed in the public school setting. There was a private school in Concord, Crestwood Academy, that had a specialized learning program. Small classes, occupational therapy built into the curriculum, individualized instruction, the kind of place that could actually reach a kid like Owen. The tuition was $32,000 a year. He and Megan both worked Tyler in commercial HVAC, Megan is a dental hygienist, but with their mortgage and their car payments and daycare they'd just finished paying off, $32,000 a year wasn't something they could absorb. He asked if I'd consider helping, maybe matching what they could put in. I told him I'd think about it. I went to my home office, pulled up my accounts, and thought about it for about 45 minutes. Then I called him back and said I'd cover the full amount. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Megan got on the phone. "Frank, that's too much. We can't let you do that." I told her that Carol and I had planned well, that my pension and my savings were solid, that the house was paid off, and that there was no version of the future I could imagine where I'd rather have that money sitting in an account than helping my grandson get the education he needed. I told her Owen was worth every penny. She cried. Tyler thanked me in that rough, quiet way men have when they're genuinely moved and don't quite know what to do with it. So I started writing the checks. $32,000 in September for the fall semester. Another $32,000 in February for the spring. I'd done it for 2 full years. $64,000. And it had worked. Owen's teacher called Tyler in the spring of his first year to say he was one of the most improved students she'd seen in a decade. He was reading above grade level by the end of year 2. Lily had tested into a gifted track at her public school. Both kids were thriving. I picked them up on Mondays and Wednesdays when Tyler and Megan both had late shifts. I took them to the park, to the library, to the Dairy Queen on Morrison Boulevard that Owen called the one with the good cups. I taught Owen to fish at Lake Norman during the summer. I helped Lily build a birdhouse for a school project. Those afternoons were the best parts of my week. Sandra was also involved, in her way. She came for birthday parties, dropped off baked goods occasionally, and made comments with some regularity about how the children were being raised. I just think they need more structure. I worry they're overscheduled. Don't you think it's too much screen time, Frank? She lived 25 minutes away and saw them perhaps twice a month. I was there twice a week, every week, and somehow her opinion always arrived with more weight than mine in any room she was in. I'd learned to let it go. Carol would have told me I was the bigger person. I told myself the same thing, and then the text. I finished painting the railing that afternoon on autopilot. When I came inside, I washed my hands at the kitchen sink and stood there for a while looking at the backyard. The bird feeder I'd put up after Carol passed was full. I'd filled it that morning. I wasn't a man who made impulsive decisions. 30 years as an electrician had trained me to slow down before touching anything important. So I didn't text back. I didn't call. I went to the refrigerator, took out the leftover pot roast I'd made Sunday, and ate dinner at the kitchen table reading a biography of Eisenhower I'd been working through for 3 weeks. Then I opened my laptop. I went through my bank records methodically. Every tuition payment, logged and dated. Every check I'd written for school supplies, for field trip fees, for the winter coats the kids needed last year when Megan mentioned the old ones had gotten too small. Birthday gifts, Christmas gifts, the microscope I'd bought Owen when he told me he wanted to be a scientist, the art supplies I'd bought Lily because her teacher said she had a real eye for color. I made a spreadsheet. It took me 2 hours. When I was done, I had a number. $67,420. Over 2 years and 1 month. I sat with that number for a while. Then I did what I never do. I opened Instagram. Tyler had set it up on my phone 2 Christmases ago as a joke, so I could see pictures of the kids. I rarely used it, but I knew how to navigate around. I found Megan's profile. The most recent post was from 3 days ago, a photo of a brand new SUV in their driveway, silver, with a big red bow on the hood. The caption read, "Mom came through, so beyond blessed. Best early Christmas gift ever." There were 47 comments. Sandra had commented a heart emoji, and "Only the best for my baby girl." I looked at the car for a long time. The February tuition payment was due in 11 weeks, $32,000. Sandra had bought her daughter a new car. She lived 25 minutes away, had plenty of time and proximity to be involved, and had just made a several $1,000 gift to the household. Meanwhile, I was excluded from Thanksgiving because the week needed to be smaller and quieter. I'm not a man who cries easily. I hadn't cried since the week Carol died, and even then, mostly at night when no one could see. But sitting there in my kitchen at 9:30 on a Tuesday, I felt something behind my eyes that took a moment to identify. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was the specific grief of finally understanding something you'd been half understanding for years. I wasn't family. I was a financial arrangement. I opened a new text to Tyler. I got Megan's text. I'd like to talk not by text. Call me when you can. He called me at 7 the next morning, before his first job. I knew he was calling early because he wanted to get it over with. Dad, hey, thanks for calling. Megan said you seemed upset. Did she? I kept my voice even. I asked a question and said I wanted to talk. I don't know that that's upset. Dad, he exhaled. It's just one Thanksgiving. Is it? I said, because Sandra is staying for a week. She lives 25 minutes away, and she's staying for a week. And I've been picking your kids up twice a week for 2 years. I'm the one paying for Owen's school, and I get a text telling me there's no room at Thanksgiving because things need to be quieter. I just want to understand the logic. Silence. The car's nice, I said. The new one. More silence. Dad, she wanted to do something nice for Megan. I know she did. I looked out the window at the oak tree. Tyler, I'm not angry about the car. I'm asking you to look at the picture you're looking at and tell me if it seems right to you. That's all I'm asking. It's not a competition, he said, and I could hear that he'd rehearsed the line. No, it's not. I paused. But it's also not nothing. I'm going to think about the tuition payment in February. I want you to think about what you want our relationship to look like. Dad, come on. I love you, son. I'll talk to you soon. I hung up. My daughter Renee called me that afternoon. She lived in Raleigh with her husband and 2 kids, and she had that particular gift of knowing when something was wrong before I said a word. We talked every week, but I'd kept the situation with Tyler mostly to myself. I hadn't wanted to stir things up between the siblings, but when she called to check in about a recipe she wanted for Thanksgiving and heard the flatness in my voice, she pushed until I told her. She listened without interrupting. Renee had always been the thinker of my 2 children, the one who sat with information before reacting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Stop paying, Renee. I mean it, Dad. You've given them over $60,000 and you're being managed out of the family. Tyler's a grown man. He needs to deal with this himself. Owen needs that school. Owen will be okay. You know what won't be okay? If those kids grow up watching their parents treat you like an ATM and thinking that's how families work. She paused. You did the same thing with Mom's illness, by the way. You made everything easier, so no one had to deal with anything uncomfortable. And what did it get you? That landed hard. You've been more than generous, she said, softer now. You've been extraordinary. But generous and a doormat are not the same thing. Mom would tell you the same. I told her I'd think about it. She told me to stop thinking and start deciding. We hung up, and I sat in the quiet house for a long time. I didn't hear from Tyler for a week. No text, no call, nothing from Megan. The silence had its own information. They weren't scrambling to fix things. They were waiting to see if I'd simply absorb it and move on, the way I apparently always had. On a Thursday morning, 11 days after Megan's original text, I got a message from Owen's phone. The kids shared one for emergencies. An old iPhone I'd given them the previous Christmas with parental controls, and a short list of approved contacts that included me. Grandpa Frank, are you coming for Thanksgiving? I told Mom I want to sit next to you for the wishbone part. Did I do something wrong? I called immediately. Megan answered on the 3rd ring. Frank, hi. He's not supposed to be on that phone. I'd like to speak to my grandson. A pause. He's in the middle of... Megan. I said her name quietly, not unkindly, but in the tone I'd used for 30 years when I was telling an apprentice that we were done negotiating about something. Please put Owen on. Another pause, shorter this time. Then Owen's voice. Grandpa? Hey, bud. I got your message. Are you mad at us? His voice was smaller than usual. What? No, absolutely not. Why would you think that? Mom said you might not come because things are complicated. I closed my eyes. Owen, listen to me. I'm never too busy for you or your sister. You hear me? Not ever. Grown-ups sometimes have disagreements about plans, and we're working through it. But that has nothing to do with you, or anything you did. Okay, a beat. I learned a new chess move from a YouTube video. Can I show you? You can absolutely show me. I want to see it. Will you come over soon? Yes, I said. I promise. After we hung up, I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. Lily's voice came into my head. She'd said something to me the previous spring while we were driving home from the library, something I'd stored away without fully understanding why. She'd said, "Grandpa, how come Grandma Sandra never picks us up?" Not as a complaint, just as genuine 7-year-old puzzlement. She lives really close. I'd said something vague about people having different schedules. Lily had accepted this and gone back to her book. That conversation had been trying to tell me something. I made a decision, not out of anger and not out of spite, out of the same clarity that comes when you've traced a wiring problem back far enough to finally see where the fault actually is. I sent an email to Tyler and Megan. I copied Renee, and I added Sandra's email address, which I'd found years ago, in a forwarded chain Tyler had included me on without thinking. The subject line, "Family Conversation This Week." The message, "I need to meet with Tyler, Megan, and Sandra Amick together to talk through some things related to our family and to the financial arrangements I've been part of. This isn't optional, and it's not meant to be adversarial, but it needs to happen in person, with everyone in the same room. I'm available Saturday at 4 o'clock at my house. Please confirm. Frank." Tyler called within the hour. "Dad, why did you email Sandra?" "Because Sandra is part of this conversation, whether anyone wants to acknowledge it or not. She's not going to like this. I'm not asking her to like it. I'm asking her to come, and if she won't, then I'll consider that her answer and proceed accordingly. Tyler, I've been patient and accommodating for 9 years. I've done it because I love this family, and I didn't want conflict. But there are some things that need to be said out loud, by everyone, in the same room. Saturday at 4. Please be there." He was quiet for a moment. Okay, Saturday was cold, the kind of gray October afternoon that makes Charlotte feel more like November. I'd made coffee and put out a tray of food I'd picked up from the bakery on the corner, the kind of gesture Carol always made when she wanted a hard conversation to feel less like a courtroom. I set the dining room table with 4 chairs. I put a folder in front of my seat. They arrived together. Sandra had come in her own car, which I noted. Tyler walked in first, then Megan, then Sandra, with the particular expression of someone who had agreed to something under protest and intended for everyone to know it. "Thank you for coming," I said. "Can I get anyone coffee?" Sandra looked around my living room with the evaluating gaze she always used in spaces that weren't hers. "I'll stand, I think," she said. "Please sit down," I said, pleasantly. "This will go better if we're all at the same level." Something in my tone made her sit. I opened the folder and stood at the head of the table. Tyler and Megan sat to my left. Sandra sat across from them. "I want to start by saying what this isn't," I said. "This isn't an ambush, and it isn't an ultimatum in the way people usually mean that word. I'm not here to threaten anyone or make accusations. I'm here because there are some things I've been swallowing for a long time, and I've realized that swallowing them hasn't been good for me or for this family. So I'm going to say them out loud, and then I'd like everyone to have the chance to respond." I picked up the first sheet. For 2 years and 1 month, I have paid the full cost of Owen's tuition at Crestwood Academy. That's $64,000 in tuition payments, plus approximately $3,400 in supplies, fees, and materials. I've done this because I love Owen, and because the school has been transformative for him. I have never asked for anything in return, except to be part of his life and his sister's life. I looked at Megan. 2 weeks ago, I received a text telling me that Thanksgiving would be immediate family only, because Sandra would be staying for the week and things needed to be smaller and quieter. I kept my voice level. That same week, I saw the Instagram post about the new car. Sandra made a sound. "I'll get to you in a moment," I said, still evenly. "I want to finish." She pressed her lips together. "What bothers me isn't the car. What bothers me is what the picture tells me." I looked at each of them in turn. Sandra has the resources to buy a several $1,000 vehicle as a gift. She lives 25 minutes away, and yet in 2 years of twice-weekly school pickups, of Monday and Wednesday afternoons, of chess games and fishing trips and library runs, she has contributed 2 birthday cakes and a casserole when Carol died. She has every means and opportunity to be present in those children's lives. She simply chooses not to invest the time, only the moments that are visible and acknowledged. Sandra started to stand. Sandra, please sit down. I said it the same way I'd told Megan to put Owen on the phone. Not loud, just clear. You'll have time to speak. Let me finish. She sat. Meanwhile, I have been there. Every week. Consistently. And I've paid for an education that neither of you I looked at Tyler and Megan could afford on your own. And when Sandra decides she wants the holidays to herself, I get a text. I paused. I'm not asking for gratitude. I'm asking for the basic respect of being treated like a member of this family, not like a utility that can be switched off when it's inconvenient. I sat down. Sandra spoke first. I have never tried to exclude you. I have simply wanted time with my daughter and my grandchildren. You live 25 minutes away, I said. I have a life, Frank. So do I. And I've spent a significant portion of it driving to Concord and back twice a week for 2 years. I kept my voice measured. Sandra, I've watched you for 9 years. I know what you do. You make small comments. You position yourself. You find ways to suggest, very gently, that my presence is a little too much, that I'm somehow overstepping just by being involved. You never say it directly. You're far too smart for that. But the effect is the same. Her face had gone a particular shade of pink that I recognized from the few times I'd seen her caught off guard. Can I say something? Megan's voice was quiet. Please, I said. She was looking at her hands. Mom did suggest the Thanksgiving thing. I want to be honest about that. She said it would be more special with just us, that you got to see the kids all the time and she didn't, and She stopped. I didn't think it through. I just sent the text without really sitting with what it meant, and I should have. She looked up at me. I'm sorry, Frank, I really am. That wasn't fair. Sandra made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Mom. Megan turned to her mother, and I saw something I hadn't expected, a steadiness in Megan's eyes that told me she'd been working up to this for longer than today. Frank has been there for my kids in ways that I'm grateful for every single day. He's been there in ways that you haven't been. And I love you, but I've been letting you steer a lot of things that aren't yours to steer, and that's on me just as much as it's on you. Sandra stared at her daughter. You bought me a car last month, Megan continued. That was generous, and I love it. But Frank has given $67,000 to make sure Owen has the education he needs. Those aren't the same scale of investment, and I've been treating them like they are. That's not right. Tyler had been quiet through all of this. I watched him. He was looking at the table the way he'd looked at the table when he was 16, and had something to say, but hadn't quite found the nerve yet. Dad, he said finally. Yeah, I owe you an apology that's been coming for a while. He lifted his eyes. I've known things were off for a long time. I've watched Sandra make comments. I've watched Megan go along with things that weren't fair to you, and I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. That was cowardice. Not anything more complicated than that. He paused. You called me out on the phone, and I got defensive, and afterward I kept thinking about how you would have handled it if the situation were reversed. And the answer is, you wouldn't have sent a text. You would have picked up the phone and talked to me like a man, like you always have. He looked at Sandra briefly, then back at me. Sandra, he said, I want you in our lives. The kids love you. But you've been running a slow campaign to make my father feel like a guest in our family for years, and I let you because it was easier than addressing it. That's over. My dad is not optional. He's not the backup grandparent. He shows up. He sacrifices. He loves those kids as much as anyone in this room, and he deserves to be treated that way. Sandra looked at her son-in-law, like she was calculating something. The silence in the room was the particular silence of someone who has been powerful for a long time and can feel that power redistributing. I want to be clear about what I'm proposing, I said. I'm going to continue the tuition payments through the end of this school year. That's through June. After that, I'd like Tyler and Megan to take over full responsibility. Not because I don't love Owen, but because I think it's important for you to have full ownership of your financial choices. This gives you 7 months to plan and save. I'll help you research scholarship options and payment plans at Crestwood, if you want that. Tyler nodded. That's fair. Second, I expect to be included in family holidays. Not every single one, but the major ones, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, the kids' birthdays. If Sandra is there, I'm there. If that creates tension, we deal with it as adults in this family. Of course, Megan said immediately. Third, I'd like to keep my Monday and Wednesday afternoons with the kids. Those matter to me, and I believe they matter to Owen and Lily. They do, Tyler said. They talk about you constantly. I looked at Sandra. Sandra, I'm not asking you to like me. I'm not asking for a friendship we don't have. I'm asking for basic civility and the acknowledgement that I have as much right to be in this family as you do. Not more. The same. Can you do that? She was quiet for a long moment. I'd expected anger. I'd expected her to find some graceful way to reframe everything that had been said. Instead, something shifted in her expression, not softening exactly, more like a kind of fatigue. Like a person who has been holding a particular posture for years and has suddenly noticed how tired their back is. I don't think I've been as aware of my behavior as I should have been, she said finally. It wasn't an apology. But it wasn't nothing either. I appreciate that, I said. And I meant it. We talked for another 90 minutes. Megan cried at one point, and I handed her the box of tissues I'd set on the counter without making a production of it. Sandra asked a few careful questions, the kind of questions that told me she was genuinely recalibrating rather than just waiting to speak. Tyler sat up straight for the whole conversation, and I watched my son become something I'd been afraid I'd helped him stop being, a man who said the hard thing. Sandra left first, a little stiffly. Before she got to the door, she turned and looked at me. Owen talks about you a lot, she said. He told me about the telescope you gave him. He showed me a star he'd found. She paused. I didn't know you'd given it to him. He found Jupiter, I said. Took him 20 minutes. She nodded once, then went out. Tyler hugged me at the door. It was a long hug, longer than he'd given me in probably 5 or 6 years. The kind that says things that talking around doesn't quite reach. When he pulled back, his eyes were red. I've been a bad son, he said quietly. You've been a scared one, I said. That's fixable. How are you so calm right now? I thought about it. Because I'm 63 years old and I've been to enough funerals to know that the things you don't say out loud are the things you regret. Your mother taught me that. I just took a while to apply it. He nodded. She'd have liked tonight. She'd have jumped in about 45 minutes earlier and been considerably less diplomatic, I said. He laughed, and it was the laugh I remembered from when he was a boy, genuine, from the belly. Thanksgiving came. It was the first holiday in 3 years where I sat at that table and felt like I was supposed to be there. Sandra was present, on her best behavior, which made everything slightly formal, but Megan made the seating chart and put me between Owen and Lily without being asked. Owen spent most of dinner explaining a documentary he'd watched about black holes and asking me questions I couldn't fully answer. Lily made me a place card with my name written in her best handwriting and a drawing of a birdhouse underneath it. Sandra left after dessert before everyone else. On her way out, she stopped in the kitchen where I was helping Megan with dishes. Owen told me you're teaching him to identify constellations, she said. He's a natural, I said. Better eye than I had at his age. She looked at me for a moment like she was deciding something. Maybe I could come along sometime. On one of your star nights. I looked at her. She wasn't performing it. She meant it, or was at least trying to mean it. I'm out there most Friday nights when it's clear, I said. Bring a jacket. She nodded and left. Megan watched the door close and then turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Did she just ask to join your astronomy nights? She did. She hates the cold. I know, I said, so she'd have to really want to come. Megan smiled and went back to the dishes. I paid the tuition through June, as I'd said I would. Tyler and Megan found a combination of a partial scholarship and a payment plan that let them keep Owen at Crestwood the following year, without my help. The first payment was 3 weeks late, and I could see it cost Tyler something to manage it, but he did it, and afterward he called me just to say he'd handled it. I told him I knew he would. My Monday and Wednesday afternoons continued without interruption. Owen showed me his chart of planetary positions in early December, printed it out, and taped it to the refrigerator in my kitchen. Lily started bringing her sketchbook when she came over, filling it with drawings of birds she identified from the feeder in the backyard. I bought her a field guide to North Carolina birds for Christmas, and she carried it around for a week, reading it like a novel. Sandra came to 2 Friday night stargazing sessions by spring. She was quieter than I'd ever seen her, and she asked genuine questions about what she was looking at. I can't tell you we became friends, but there's a version of people you see when they stop performing, and the version of Sandra I saw on those cold evenings, wrapped in a blanket in my backyard looking up at Orion, was more interesting than the version I'd known before. Less defended. Things don't always resolve the way they do in stories where the villain transforms and everything becomes warm. What actually happened was smaller and more real. Sandra stopped steering. She stopped making comments. She showed up when she was invited and went home when it was time. And Tyler, for his part, became the person I'd raised him to be: present, honest, protective of his family in all directions, including the direction of his father. The night I think about most when I look back on all of it isn't the Saturday meeting, as important as that was. It's a Wednesday evening in February, a few months after everything had settled. I was driving Owen and Lily back from the library, and it had started raining. That gentle rain that comes in just before dark and makes everything smell like earth and cold metal. Lily had fallen asleep in the back seat. Owen was looking out the window at the wet streets. He said, "Out of nowhere, Grandpa, are you happy?" I glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "What made you ask that?" "I don't know." He was still looking out the window. "You seem happy lately. Like, more than before." I thought about that for a moment. "I think I am," I said. "I had some things to work through, but yeah, I think I'm happy." "Good," he said, like it was settled. We drove the rest of the way in the quiet rain, and I kept my hands steady on the wheel. And I thought about Carol, and about all the years I'd spent accommodating my way around hard truths, instead of walking straight through them. I thought about what my daughter Renee had said, that generosity and being a doormat were not the same thing. I'd confused them for a long time. I'd told myself that keeping the peace was a kind of love, and maybe sometimes it is. But the night I sat at my dining room table with a folder of bank statements and 3 people who needed to hear some things, I learned something I should have learned decades earlier. Love sometimes sounds like a quiet voice that won't be talked out of what it knows. Love sometimes looks like a man who's done accommodating, who sets out 4 chairs, who stands at the head of his own table and finally says what's true. Carol would have recognized it. I think that's what she'd been waiting for.